After President Trump's talk with the Big Ten, it looks like they're playing football again. Does this have enough power to cause Ohio to stay with Trump in the 2020 election? Join us today as we talk about Ohio. Yeah. Welcome back, guys, to another Mr. R show. Today is the Ohio Profile. As always, I am Andy.
I'm Ashton.
And today is a little interesting. Ohio, before we get into it, is a very, very interesting state, especially in the election history. Ashton, I know I've been to Ohio a couple of times. I don't know personally about you, but what's your initial reactions when I say we're talking about Ohio?
Ohio is a big modern bellwether. I've been to Ohio twice. It is a very beautiful, beautiful state. Really, really nice people. But Ohio's been a very competitive state, but more Republican leaning, and there hasn't been a modern Republican president, at least since the, I believe, 60s, that hasn't won Ohio and won the presidency. It's been a critical state, and like we said, it was a bellwether.
But yeah, Ashton, just speaking on the point of how crucial winning Ohio is, accuracy-wise, they're 45 out of 54. That's 83% accurate. That's amazing for a president. Not to mention their streak. They have picked the correct candidate every single election since 1964's election. Republican or Democrat, it didn't matter. They picked it. So it is safe to say, at least looking at the trends, that whoever wins Ohio more likely will win the election come 2020 in 2 months.
Mm-hmm. And that was JFK versus Nixon, where Nixon won it, but he lost. Nixon would go on to win it the next 2 times he ran. And I think it just shows how flippity-floppity, as you coined the term, Ohio is in general. Let's move on to the past elections. Obama got around 50.6% to Romney's 47%, and Trump got 51% to Clinton's 43%. So Clinton performed pretty terribly. She ended up losing 7% of people who voted for Obama.
Yeah.
And Trump gained about a good 3%. So you can see this state quickly changed. And that turnout on the kind of rural part really helped Trump a lot, boost his margins up. Current polling right now has Biden leading by 2 points. It is a very fluid state. Polling has been it's one of the few states where polling has been kind of everywhere. I definitely think quality polling in the state, it's one of the best states to look at polling. It typically is more accurate because they've been polling it. It's like the most polled state out of all the swing states because it's Ohio. It's always in play and it's always swingy. Yeah, overall, I don't see any really bad polls. So far, it shows it's still within the margin error. Anyone can win it. It's definitely going to be one of those states that goes with whoever wins the election typically, just because the independents or the undecideds tend to decide it.
I want to go back real quick to just emphasize the difference between 2012 and 2016 in Ohio, right? If you look at 2012, it was a close race. Obama did prevail. Democrat did prevail there. But then you look at 2016, Trump did better than Obama and, as relative as the winning candidate. And then Clinton did so terribly, in fact, that she performed the lowest out of any candidate in his 2-party system since 1972. She did historically awful in that state. And it shows because of how, we'll get into it in a second, in the industries. And the huge industry in Ohio, kind of a spoiler, is the automotive industry.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They were so, at least the workers in the auto industry in Ohio were so disgruntled. And other kind of industries along with that was so disgruntled in 2016 that Donald Trump appealed to them versus a candidate like Hillary Clinton, establishment, very, some could say crooked, very iffy Trump appealed to them, said, we're going to bring jobs back, American jobs. That's what got him the appeal in 2016. That got him more votes than Obama and beat Clinton by so much. Now, we'll get to this also in a second, with Donald Trump's kind of attack on Goodyear, the boycott of Goodyear. Goodyear is,
Yeah.
spoiler alert, headquartered in Ohio. That's not a time to start doing that because you need this state to win come November.
Yes.
And if you're telling a huge portion of your base, Goodyear tires, that don't buy them, people are going to lose their jobs. And if they lose their jobs, they're going to come out and vote against you. So politically, it doesn't make sense, and it just shows that as quick as Trump got that lead in 2016, he can lose it just like that.
Hey, you mentioned automotive. I guess it's time for us to get into industries. This is your favorite part, and let's kind of keep on rolling with the automotive. It is since 2002 has accounted for 16 billion in revenue, which is slightly a decline, similar to kind of states like Michigan and such. They are building back up, and it's projected to have over 28,000 automotive jobs by 2024. Major brands are Ford, Honda, and GM that provide jobs in the state, and Goodyear. So, Andy, who do you think automotive is leaning towards this election?
This is the toughest industry to decide who it favors, in my opinion, because all up until maybe a few weeks ago, I would have said Donald Trump is favored by the automotive industry, specifically in Ohio. But now, like we said, him attacking Goodyear tires, that's a problem for him. I don't know if people are seriously going to boycott Goodyear tires or that's just more of his rhetoric. We don't know. We don't know the numbers right now. But still, I think if jobs aren't lost, I think Donald Trump has a slight edge in the automotive industry in Ohio.
I think this is one where the economy taking a downturn and his recent comments, not solely because of those, but kind of combination of things, Biden has a slight favor in my opinion.
Yeah, but we can disagree, and that's fine. But we'll see how that boycott actually takes on shape and form. But let's move on to the second major industry action, and that is aerospace. Ohio has the reputation, as you know, as the birthplace of aviation. Now, don't tell North Carolinians that, our last state profile, because they say the same thing. You guys can debate that in the comments and for all of eternity. But they are one of the ones that say they are birthplace of aviation. This, in return, creates a lot of aerospace stuff. Annual impact of $8 billion on the state's economy. They're top 5 in the country in aerospace parts production, 8th in aerospace employment, and they're home to a famous research base by NASA, the Glenn Research Center. So huge aerospace industry. I still think, as of right now, due to the increased budget and increased emphasis on space programming, especially with the laughable, sometimes memeable Space Force, I think Ohio's aerospace industry slightly favors Trump.
Yeah, I agree there.
Let's move on to the last major industry we will talk about. Ohio, obviously, we could talk about ones that are obvious in every state, agriculture, tourism, but for the first time, I think, in the history of these state profiles, Ashton, we do not have any agriculture as one we're going to talk about. So that is cool to see differences. And this is one that's original, and that is the steel industry, iron and steel. Historically, Ohio is the steel center of the U.S. Now, people in Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania might disagree, but in just terms of raw numbers, Ohio's a little bit above that in steel production. Over 14 million tons of steel come out of Ohio per year. That accounts for 15% of the country's raw steel production. That's a nice chunk of change right there. But the Chinese imports threaten this industry. And we know how these trade wars have been going on with tariffs. So, again, a lot of these industries are under like 50-50 now because of the things that Donald Trump has done while in office. Ashton, who do you think steel favors right now?
I feel like still out of all three is a little bit more unionized, and it's very heavily like entrenched unions because it's been still center of the country for a long time, and I feel like it favors Biden slightly.
Yeah, I can agree with that. It's very union-centric. The North is usually that. They very much a union state. So it's got a slight edge to Biden. When it comes to just companies located in Ohio, they have 27 of the 2020 Fortune 500 companies. So that's a lot. They're very much a economic powerhouse, especially in cities like Cleveland and Cincinnati. Um, Popular companies include Marathon, gas, the gas company, Kroger, Procter and Gamble. They make all of your soaps and shampoos, so like Dove. You got Nationwide, you got Progressive, two big insurance companies that everybody should know by now with their commercials. Sherwin-Williams Paint, and then Goodyear Tire, which we said earlier. Before we move on to the race demographics, I want to just stop for a second and emphasize just kind of the strategy that Donald Trump has to stay in office. I think, and you can, say I'm wrong on this one, Ashton, but in my opinion, I think Ohio is the one of the easiest states, or should be, for Trump to regain. It's the easiest out of the others, except for maybe Iowa, to keep Republican. I think, due to the industries there, like we just established, and already were favorable to Trump in 2016. Now it's 50-50. It's a close race. Kasich, the governor, John Kasich, the old governor, comes out and supports Joe Biden. That's going to take a hit. And this was a state that Donald Trump just could not lose. He needed this state to be the safe state for him, where he could go and work very hard in like Pennsylvania and Michigan, harder states to grab for Republicans. But Ohio is now on the verge of being blue.
It depends how you say historically or not. Like, I'll agree when it comes to between cycles, should be out of the swing states one of the more easier ones for him to hold on to. He won it by a good margin, and he just overall performed so well there 4 years ago. So it's one of those things where he definitely needs to try to sew this one up by October, or like into October. You want to see yourself leading in the polls by at least a point or two, and hope you overperform in kind of the late breakers, which he did last time, and that kind of provided a nice cushy margin for Trump during the election.
I just think that he needs Ohio to have a chance to win. If he loses Ohio, or that's called for Joe Biden, you're going to see a long night for Trump because he needs Ohio. And if he loses that, it's hard to make up ground in other states. But
We'll get into that more when we make our calls.
But let's move on to their population, right? So on your screen now, you're going to see a population pyramid in 2020 of Ohio. It's somewhat different than the ones we've seen in previous videos. They have an average median age of 39.3, with the males being at 37.8 and the females being at 40.8. They have a female to male ratio of 51% female, and then 49% male, 63.3 age dependency ratio. So an older population in the state, back when, the baby boomers, industrial, they work with their hands kind of people in Ohio, which steel, automotive, it makes sense. But another kind of interesting factor in this graph that you see is a decreasing younger population. It's a nice 25 to 20-year-old range, but the 40, 30, 45-year-old population, you see the decrease between the older generation and the younger generation. And that is due a lot to actually, like, a lot of people immigrated out of Ohio. A lot of people actually moved to South Carolina. South Carolina is a big state for Ohioans. I don't know why. Don't ask me. I'm not, a geography person. I'm not a people study of people person. But they left in swarms of people. They created families, and that's you're seeing them at the 40, 45, 35 range. These are the ages of those parents now. So it's interesting to see that, Ashton. Let's move on to the race demographics, also up on your screen right now. It is about 81% white, 12% Black or African American, almost 3% two or more races, just over 2% Asian, and then, less than 1 to 2% other races mixed in there. It makes sense. The North was usually, in times before the Civil War, before all that, they were historically more white than the South because, they did not have slaves, did not have slavery in the North. So more whites lived there. It makes sense to see that, which makes sense. Let's move on into the final demographic we're going to talk about today, and that is the religion. In Ohio, they are 73% Christian, 4% of non-Christian faiths like Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, and then a 22% unaffiliated, so non-religious sector there. This is a state that maybe the first time we've seen have a pretty healthy non-Christian, other than maybe I think Michigan also had one. It just shows the North is a little bit less religious than the South. I think that does not come as a shock to anybody, any of our listeners there, but only a 73% Christian base. Ashton, do any of these demographics strike you or ring a bell in any sort of way?
I would say that there's two things. Has a heavy older electorate, and it has a smaller minority compared to the other Midwest states. And I think that's one of the reasons you see Trump do better in Ohio versus like Pennsylvania or Michigan or even Wisconsin. I believe Wisconsin had like 16 or 17%, if I'm going off of memory. So it's definitely one of the more wider, older states, which benefits Trump.
It just goes to show that if Trump cannot keep Ohio in his pocket on election day, his chances of winning go down a lot. Because white and old is Ohio. You look at the other swing states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, less white, less old, more minority. That does not favor Trump for the most part, usually. So if he cannot keep Ohio, it's going to be a long night for him. So,
So, Andy, you get the call, and they ask you who wins Ohio. What do you say?
if this is a tough one, Ohio is another one of those states, I think I said this about North Carolina, that's flippity floppity,
Hmm.
and it's a tough decision to make. With all the outliers, all the things Trump said, all the things that are happening with COVID and protests, Ohio has not been plagued with protests as much as other states. But as of right now, it's going to be a controversial pick because it does not agree with the current polls at the moment. But if it was election day and I got the call, I would keep Trump winning Ohio with the closest margin out of any other state. But Ashton, it's election day and they're calling you to choose and to pick who wins Ohio. Who do you got?
So this state is not going to be decided on election night. I think I would put that at around 80% chance. I really expect this to be one of the more like I expect this state to take a week to be called. I expect the results to be incredibly close. Within whoever wins, I think it'll be around 1% as things stand today, with Biden leading in national polls around 8 to 9%, leading in state polls by like 2%. So overall, if I had to guess, because I've gone back and forth on the state, honestly, like every month I have the person winning it different. But right now, I feel in my gut that Biden will pull it out. I just feel like it's going to look like Trump won it on election night, but they're not going to call it. And people will be wondering why. And it's because I feel like out of all the swing states, this will be the one where Biden doesn't have a advantage on day of voting, but he has a huge advantage in mail-in voting. That's where I go against the grain. I don't think that some of the other swing states Trump will destroy in the on-day voting. I think Biden will actually beat him. But Ohio, I do expect Trump to beat Biden on day voting. So I expect it to be a late call, and I do think ultimately Biden will be the winner in the Buckeye State. And I think it has to do with everything with the tariffs, the economy, and his statements all rolled up into one bow. And like I was looking, I'm like, if Biden wins Ohio, what is what other path does Trump have? It's very rough, Andy, because even if Biden wins just Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin, just those, and loses every other swing state, Trump would have to win Minnesota, Nevada, and Virginia on top
Ooh.
of all the other toss ups just to get a tie. Just to get a tie. So that should underscore how critical the state is, because if he doesn't win it, his options get very limited, even if he holds on to other states where he's behind, like Nevada and Arizona and Virginia.
It's just going to show that this is going to be a historic race, an historic election in November. Either way, you know how Donald Trump has said things that are close to voter suppression, with maybe he won't accept the results. Who knows? Mail-in voting fraud. We might talk about that in a later video and the myths and stuff about that. But guys, thank you for joining us this week as we talked about Ohio and the election profile, just talking about what makes them tick, who they are, and who we think they're going to vote for. We may or may not be back next week due to, obviously, 9/11 is next week. We're either going to do a 9/11 kind of centric video or just take the day off for remembrance of the occasion. But either way, we'll be back on the Tuesday following that to do another Political Perch podcast. Go check those out. We have a lot of fun doing them. We have a lot more opinions, a lot more free flow talk back and forth. This one last week, you can go watch last Tuesday. We talked about both the conventions. We talked about our opinions on the protests going on, the race relations, according to Donald Trump, his basically chances of winning, everything, the recap from May to now. So it's a fun one. Go check that out. We would very much appreciate that. As always, guys, please hit that subscribe button if you want to see more. Hit that like button as well. And we'll see you guys in the next video.